Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the KPQC Learning Forum for June. Please remember to put your name and agency or facility in the chat so we can keep track of attendance. I'm going to keep admitting folks, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Tara and Carrie and Jill.
I like those names. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Learning Forum for June. As you're writing your names and your agency in the chat, I just wanted to say I know the wonderfulness of summer met with lots of busy babies happening. It's busy baby season for everybody, I think. The fact that you take time out every month to talk and listen and to connect is extraordinarily important to all of us, and we thank you for being with us today. And as Tiffany mentioned, please don't forget full moon 2, Jill says that is correct. And haven't we all felt that one? Please don't forget to put your agency in hospital. If there are multiple folks in your room, give yourselves credit for everybody that's there. Next slide. So we mentioned this at the in-person conference back a month or so ago. Wanted to make sure that all of you, everyone who is on this call or is a part of the KPQC, is invited to our virtual fall conference that will happen October 22nd from 9 to noon that day. So please send in your request off, your PTO, or whatever it takes. You don't have to travel. You can do it from your office, home, computer, etc. But we are almost ready to announce the lineup, and you're going to be very, very excited. Some great speakers that are coming to you, again, virtually. So you will receive the entire listserv for KPQC, and Candace will receive the registration link soon with agenda, so be ready for that, but want to make sure you have that marked off on your calendar. Next slide. So we try to bring you as much as we can, and again, all of Kansas, in terms of training opportunities or FYIs or some state and national news. We call it rapid response every month. And the three things that are hitting, hitting the rapid response slide deck, so to speak, this month includes the first thing is the KCC training opportunities. You see a snapshot there on the right-hand side about two pieces. The Kansas Connecting Communities group, remember, is really focused on improving maternal mental health and family mental health, quite frankly, across the state of Kansas. They are the powerhouse folks that are connecting providers, patients, bedside workers, triage, community members, family, to make sure that we help every single birthing person in Kansas. So the two opportunities through KCC are listed there on the right. If you didn't receive that email with registration links and information about those two opportunities, please reach out to Carrie or I, and we will send that to you. Specifically, there's a lactation for mental health providers training. You see that in the first paragraph there to the right. The second is about perinatal mental health training, which is really for providers and professionals that are caring at the bedside for women throughout the lifespan. Wonderful opportunities. And again, any questions, you can direct it to Carrie or I, and we'll get you in connection with the KCC team. Number two, really important, go back for me, Tiffany, thank you. Number two is the link that you see there. If you are a fourth trimester champion currently, and have not filled out your interest form, which is that safety bundle input link you see there, please do so. Those of you that are not currently enrolled as an FTI hospital in our current initiative, we still want your input. So if your hospital has not been enrolled, again, we would like for you to click that link. Tiffany will send it out after today's learning forum. But what we're asking for is every birthing hospital, and quite frankly, every hospital that sees any deliveries or any postpartum patients, to go ahead and take that survey. What we're asking is interest in a limited amount, but various options for the next safety bundle. And really are using your input to drive the decision of what we're going to do after fourth trimester initiative has been completed at the end of this year. So if you want some input, please complete the form, put your hospital's name in there, and give us some feedback ASAP. If you have any questions about that, reach out to Carrie Smith for me. And then number three, actually, excuse my voice is a problem today. If you will, Tiffany, go ahead and go to the next slide. So there are lots of opportunities that come through because we're enrolled in a national safety bundle through AIM. That's the group that's in charge of that. Again, that's direct connection to ACOG. So they oversee safety bundles and multiple safety bundles throughout the nation. One of the things that we constantly talk about in Kansas is maternal mortality, but we also are talking more and more and more about maternal morbidity and severe maternal morbidity at that. Something that crossed through our email in the last week or so is this phenomenal option for hospitals to use a direct template at your facility to review severe maternal morbidity cases at your facility. I took a snapshot on the left there of page 1 of, I think it's several pages deep, that walks you through, if your hospital were to choose to use this form, how to review a case of SMM. Now, to use that without education or training at your facility isn't a good idea. And so AIM and ACOG have offered free training sessions. That's the right-hand snapshot there. All of this is embedded in an email that we will send to you if you're interested. So again, reach out to Carrie, Jill, or I, any of us, and request that link and those free training sessions. We would love for our hospitals across the state to begin to use a standardized template to review those cases that you have at your facility and give us some feedback. Next slide. And then real quick overview of a couple of the fourth trimester project pieces. Again, all of us are working fast and furious to finish this safety bundle by the end of the year, and we're seeing great progress on many, many, many fronts. Next slide. One big aha moment that I'm trying to remind all the hospitals that I'm talking to, Carrie's doing the same, is there is no further need for you to put data into QHI. So for the champions that have been putting, for these last 2.5 years, putting data into the QHI system to keep track of discharges, to tell us about benchmarks that you're completing, you can stop that now. We're not using QHI from this part forward. So thank you for those of you that have, but we are good now. If you have completed in another project, which some of those we're going to talk about in a second, you just simply send an email to Carrie or I with what you've completed, a snippet about how you completed it, or if we've asked for documentation, send that with your email. But that's how we're keeping track of what's left. If you have questions, reach out. But no more QHI is necessary. Next slide. I wanted to show off, again, you guys do phenomenal work, and we get to see it, but we don't always get to share it due to time constraints. Well, this is one of those opportunities to show off some great work happening at one of our facilities, specific to the community resource list piece under the fourth trimester. Remember, across the state, one of the things we kept hearing about from patients and providers and community members and folks involved in SMM and maternal mortality cases is that we didn't know how to connect the person to what they needed. And so the community resource list is each hospital's job to do to make sure that you know where to send patients for help post-discharge. Next slide. And it should have these components to it. Again, this is all on that large final planning PowerPoint that all of our champions should have. But these are the criteria that we require to be a part of that community resource list if they are available in your community. Next slide. And so we charged all of you as fourth trimester champions and hospitals to create your own, to keep it as updated as you can as part of the fourth trimester bundle. And in fact, McPherson nailed it. So Jacqueline emailed me a while back and wanted to make sure that what they were doing was going to meet those benchmarks and to, quite frankly, tell me that they were pretty excited about what they were doing. And I went, holy cow, this is perfect. So not everybody has the resources like McPherson does to make it quite so pretty and so eye-opening and so easy to read and to find your help. But this is exactly what we're looking for. Easy resources that could be shared on social media, given to patients, posted across the hospital setting in the outpatient area. But nice work, McPherson. Really, really impressed with what you did. Of course, that more than makes the mark for that benchmark to be completed for fourth trimester for them.
It
Next
helps
slide.
to have a really good marketing person who will put all that together for you. But I got all the information. I made it look okay, and she made it look a whole lot better.
There is nothing wrong with collective work, collaborative management. Great job, Jackie. Great job. Next part is just a little tug at everybody. And again, we talk about fourth trimester groups, but quite frankly, every hospital that delivers patients and works to connect them to their postpartum visit should be aware of this. We really are encouraging that the comprehensive postpartum visit is made prior to discharge from the facility. Next slide. And in order to make sure that that postpartum visit meets the marks of what ACOG recommends in 2024, we would ask that every champion send an email, simple email to all of the all the outpatient clinics who see your postpartum patients. That could be a health department, FQHC, a private practice, health center, anybody that sees your postpartum patients, that they know the criteria that meets the mark for that postpartum visit. The example of wording to have in that email is there. And then the next slide for me, Tiffany, has criteria for what should be included in a discharge summary coming from your facility. Next slide, please. As well as what that comprehensive visit in the outpatient setting should include. Okay, so simple way to finish this part of the fourth trimester initiative is to send that email, make sure that your outpatient clinics are aware of this massive change, which is a good thing, good change, and that you all are set up for easy transition to the postpartum side of that patient's care. If you have questions about what needs to happen or how to do so, reach out to Carrie or I. Next slide. This is just another version of that other slide. Again, all of these are in that final planning PowerPoint. If you don't have it, get a hold of me. But these are pieces that could be embedded in that email out to those folks. They just talk about the criteria for that new comprehensive postpartum visit template. Next slide. Ooh, Kara, that took 11 minutes, not 15. Fucking fast today. We're excited to feature presentations today on yet another important part of our fourth trimester initiative, but one that sometimes is a little confusing to understand how it fits. We talk about family planning immediately postpartum, which feels sometimes awkward, right? Certainly in an event of a demise, but also just a routine, welcomed postpartum event. We need to be talking about family planning and helping patients be connected. So specifically for our current safety bundle, we talk about the reproductive life planning criteria and key points that are listed there. Shared decision-making, what are the options for contraception? What is the intention of pregnancy and birth spacing? All of those pieces are embedded in what we're getting ready to hear about today. Next slide. When we talk about fourth trimester initiative being really about the new postpartum model of care in Kansas, and actually now connecting to other states that are beginning to adopt this safety bundle, we talk about the flow of traffic, right? We start on the left, we do all the things that we need to do, and we shoot that through all the way to our comprehensive postpartum visit. Family planning is embedded in all of these pieces and that new model of care. And if we don't talk about it, unintended pregnancy, in fact, becomes a bigger and bigger issue for our patients with adverse outcomes. Next slide. And again, this is just a gentle reminder. Dr. Busenhart will talk about this too, but in the postpartum setting, long-active reversible contraception needs to be discussed. She'll talk about that some more, but we hammer that a little bit more in fourth trimester because for a long time in Kansas, nobody was talking about that. So next slide. So who is this elusive speaker? We have asked certainly a long-term champion for birthing persons in our state, certainly a very, very active and engaged nurse midwife from the University of Kansas setting, but also just wonderful to talk to at the bedside. I practiced with her for many years. We talk to this day. And when I thought about who could give us some updated family planning education for all walks of the postpartum bedside conversation, Dr. Kara Busenhart was the first that came to mind. So as you hear Dr. Busenhart today, please keep in mind that we're talking to you, not because we think that you're going to be the person in a postpartum outpatient setting, though you may be, but the 2 o'clock in the morning at the bedside conversation, or the person doing rounds, or the person on the phone who's helping birthing persons make decisions about family planning decisions in the postpartum setting. Without further ado, Dr. Kara Busenhart, welcome today. We're glad to have you. Tiffany, you can roll through those slides for me. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Tara. We have been each other's providers as well, so we know from experience what it's like receiving care from a really skilled midwife. So I'm excited to be here. Tara probably thought of me because she knows that I would love to talk about birth control on every conceivable occasion. It's one of my very favorite topics. So we'll just jump right into it. My main goal through this, you guys will have access to the slides, is that you know where to get resources, because I think one of the hardest things is that you don't want to say the wrong thing or you don't want to provide the wrong education. And so knowing where to go at 2 a.m., at 4 p.m., whenever it is, weekend, it's always like Friday evening or something like that. I'm going to give you a lot of resources of where you can find things, but we're going to talk about reproductive life planning. I like that term so much better than family planning, because family planning has kind of gotten a negative connotation in our society. We're going to talk about patient-centered counseling. I just did some CE on this and it's kind of blown my mind. So I'm going to share what I've learned there. And then I want to talk about contraceptive options, just to make sure that you all feel like you have the chance to ask questions about new methods or starting methods, what some of the contraindications may be, and how we've loosened up a lot of the recommendations about when to start contraception in the postpartum period. And then again, like I said, sharing resources. So next slide. Yeah. So again, what does it mean to plan your family and reproductive life? To me, it's all about empowerment for the patient and their engagement in their care. And this is really a time to partner with the patient and her partner and, support about what would be ideal for them, not necessarily what would be ideal for me. So, good old definitions. Family planning is the practice of controlling the number of children in a family and the intervals between their births. Really important for family spacing. That's particularly important when we think about our patients that have had a prior cesarean and that scarred uterus. The timing really does play an important role in future outcomes. And it could be through contraception and contraceptive methods, but it could also be sterilization, which is obviously a type of contraception. But reproductive life planning is so much better, because it's really like, I want you to sit down and think about, do you want to have children? Do you want to have more children? How would you like to space them? If you could really think about your ideal plan, what would it look like? And I had someone mention that we ask teenagers all the time, what do you want to be when you grow up? Or where are you going to go to college? Or what career do you want to have? When we could also be asking them, do you want to have children in the future? We ask them to plan their careers so much, when actually the makeup and composition of their family and the design of that is probably way more important. Certainly it's more important to their health. So thinking about it's so much more, it's values, it's goals, it's what resources and life circumstances. And it doesn't mean that your reproductive life plan doesn't change over time. All right. So the one key question, easiest question that any of us can ask is, would you like to become pregnant in the next year? And then what the answer is to that helps us know what we should do next. So if someone says they want to be pregnant in the next year, we need to think about getting them preconception counseling. We could talk about contraceptive counseling if they want to delay in that time of that year. What might work if you want to delay 3 months? What might work if you want to be pregnant in 6 months? There's different methods that would work better for different timing. And then obviously making recommendations for early entry to prenatal care. But if someone doesn't, they absolutely know they do not desire a pregnancy in the next year, then our options look different. It would be, what are you currently using? Do you like it? Do you want to stay on that? Is there another option that you'd like to talk about? It could be initiating a new method. It could be talking about safer sex practices. And then obviously making a plan of when to follow up. But some people don't know. Yes, I absolutely want to be pregnant. No, I absolutely don't want to be pregnant. And they fall somewhere in the middle of if it happened, I'd be okay with it, or I don't know. And then those options look a little bit different as well. So we'll come back to how to assess someone and what method might be best for them. But if you ask nothing else, this one key question is one of the most important things that you can do during prenatal care, during preconception care, during woman care, any of those different things. I think of a chance to talk about contraception and reproductive life planning should probably be at every single visit that you have with someone that has, reproductive potential. So All right, let's go on to the next one. This is a form from Ohio, and there are different ones available online. I literally just Googled reproductive life plan, and this one was a nice clean copy that I could get a picture of. That's really how I choose things for my presentations. But you can find anything that you would want to recreate yourself or borrow. Borrowing is fine as long as you give credit where it's due. And this would be something that you could use in your primary care offices, in the, just having available on the unit. It could even be slid into those like registration folders or the postpartum folders that go home with patients. Just planting the seed that people could be thinking about planning out the rest of their reproductive life. And it dives a little bit deeper into like, what are some of your goals? What are your resources? How are you doing emotionally? What's your health history? And so again, borrow freely. I love the idea of planning, and especially if you're talking to teenagers and adolescents, let's start then, because it's much easier before the first pregnancy to talk about reproductive life planning and family planning. All right, I already mentioned this, but when should we address it? All the time. But I think when we're talking about pregnancy in particular, we want to think about after any loss, whether it's a first trimester loss or it's a stillbirth, you definitely want to be talking about family planning. It may seem insensitive to you, but it's actually kind of, I don't want to say it's worse, but to not address it is worrisome, and your patient will appreciate the opportunity to talk about these things. The other would be ideally sometime in like early third trimester. I kind of think around that 28-week visit, planting the seed that this is something we should be talking about for after delivery. And then again, near term, especially if I know that a patient is going to want a postpartum IUD, I may already have them set up. We will do the, benefits check, all those different things, and have them set up so that as soon as we're ready for them postpartum, we have everything in place and ready to go. But certainly, if we haven't had those conversations or the patient was unsure, we want to talk about it before they're discharged from the birthing facility. And I actually put it on my admission note of what their plan is for postpartum birth control, so that if I'm not the one to see them postpartum on rounds, my partners know exactly what our plan was. They know what we were thinking, that kind of idea. And then if they don't have a plan already in place or something that they're using, that we definitely address it in the postpartum office visit. So next, we'll talk a little bit about how to offer choice to people, empower them to make the choices right for them. I think that's one of the most important things. So if we focus on the patient and the client and not ourselves, we will be doing a better service to our patients and the communities that we serve. So I recently attended, as I mentioned, a continuing ed on this idea of patient-centered contraceptive choice. And I kind of sat there like, I don't know if anybody else has ever done this, but kind of dumbfounded of like, oh my God, what have I been doing wrong all these years? And it was talking a lot about how, as providers, we could be quite coercive in our counseling with patients, because we counsel people about things that we ourselves really like or what might be important to us. And if you think, oh no, I always give every patient every choice, you may think that you do. I have certainly thought that I have over the years, but I really like IUDs. I really like the NuvaRing. I really like a lot of different contraceptive choices. And I am pretty sure I've probably led people in those directions when that may not have been what would have totally met their identified goal. To me, when I think about contraception, I always think of like, preventing pregnancy is the most important thing. Well, it's not always the most important thing to everyone else when they talk about contraception. Or there's equally as important things to them other than just preventing a pregnancy. So we start out this questioning with, do you think you might like to have more children at some point? And they say yes or no, or they're not sure. And then we go on from there. These resources you can find on the Reproductive Health National Training Center. Lots of educational materials there, lots of algorithms to walk through. These are just some screenshots of it, but starting out with, do you think you'd like to have children at some point? And then we can go to the next slide. And if we work our way down, it would be, would you like to talk about your birth control options? And I think the most important thing here is, do you have a sense of what's important to you about your birth control method? And this is the thing that, as I said, my head kind of exploded and I got like really introspective and reflected a lot on, oh my goodness, I've really focused on what was important to me, and I may have been doing a disservice to patients. The other thing to think about is particularly patients from underrepresented minorities, underserved communities, at risk, however you want to define it, are more likely to be coerced based on the provider's preference to really help them have long-term contraception, and that may not be the patient's desire. So there's a lot of evidence out there that we have been leading people in a certain way that may not best suit them. So if we ask people, what is most important to you? I think this next slide is one of the most interesting, because there are a whole lot of things listed here that someone might say is what's most important to them about contraception. And you'll see that it's on the second line on the right, where finally it gets to how well it prevents pregnancy. To me, I'm like circling that, highlighting it, underlining it. Like, my life goal is to not have an unplanned pregnancy. And I'm telling you guys, I turned 50 this year. I think I'm almost there. It's still a goal. I don't want to like ruin it at this point, but to other people, there's other things that are more important. Like, does it have hormones in it? Does it not? Is it going to make am I going to gain weight? That's kind of one of those fallacies we'll talk about more in a bit, but can I use it with breastfeeding? How much does it cost? That's always been a big one. Does it, help other symptoms that I might have, like endometriosis or menstrual migraines or those kinds of things? So there are so many different things that might be important to someone. And if we don't ask them what that important part is, we may not help them to find the right thing for them. We may find them a very highly effective contraceptive method, but it may not be the one that they really, really want. So we can go to the next. This is a handout, screenshot of a handout from Partners in Contraceptive Choice and Knowledge. And the PIC website was federally funded. It's active through 2023. They are not updating their materials after 2023 because they don't have the funding. But I would say I think this is a great place to start with education, and things that are said on here right now are still currently true. And you could always adapt in the future, and they are open to that idea as well. But this is a postpartum contraception birth control guide. And what is cool about it is it has things of like, what can you start right after delivery? And so you see some of our LARCs across the top, or sterilization. Then it goes to like, well, you may need a visit, or you may need a device. It then goes to, you need a prescription to start it. And then there's others that you can use starting on your own. I like this. I think the pictures are fun. I think the instructions are really nice. It tells you like how long or how often you have to think about the method. So like if we're talking about one of the hormonal IUDs, well, some of them are good for 3 years and some are good up to 8 years. And if we talk about the copper, it's good up to 12 years. You only have to think about your contraceptive method once every 10 to 12 years or something like that. The other thing is that, sometimes you need to think about your contraceptive method with every single sex act. For some people, that is not very frequent. For others, that might be much more frequent. And so depending on what the method is, that can come into cost as well. And then, as Brenda mentioned, it does talk about breast and chest feeding as contraception. And then always thinking about, like, are these methods safe with breastfeeding and won't have, I shouldn't say won't have an impact. I think everything can have an impact, but won't negatively impact milk supply, that sort of thing. If we go to the next slide, it is the back of the handout. And again, you can see things that you might need a prescription to start that you wouldn't start until 6 weeks after delivery, or the thing that you could start on your own, but you wouldn't want to start until 6 weeks after delivery. Now, I don't know if everyone knows that the 6-week thing on abstinence is like totally made up, but the thought of it is really about like when that placental site has completely healed, there's less likely chance of infection. If the patient had any lacerations or an episiotomy, that has had time to heal. I think Tara's point of, I think it was like up to 57% of people don't wait until 6 weeks to initiate sexual activity after birth. I always laugh that there's the people that wait 6 months and there's the people that like get right at it. Like there's like not any in between. There really is all the in between and everything else, but we do want to be aware that a lot of people are sexually active before they return for their 6-week postpartum visit. There's information here about timing of an IUD insert, which could be all the way from right at the time of delivery until any time after, typically waiting until that like 6 to 8 weeks after delivery if we're going to do an interval. The other thing that I love, and this is because I told you how important it is to me of like how effective it is at preventing pregnancy. I love the chart that shows that out of an average 100 people, this many will get pregnant in a year if they use the method as people normally use it. So we're not, it's not necessarily perfect use. We can say pretty much perfect use with sterilization in our LARCs, because once it's in, individual doesn't have to interact with it. But anything that requires, the person using the method to interact with it, we see our efficacy go down because user error is just more likely. All right, let's go on to our next slide. We can't forget that people do have medical problems and medical issues, and there's all kinds of different life circumstances that they could find themselves in. And so we do have the U.S. medical eligibility criteria, or the U.S. MEC. It's based off of the World Health Organization MEC, and it is put forward by the CDC. So if you go in to look, this is a snapshot of a chart that they have available that you can have on your wall in your office. They have materials online. I have an app on my phone. Any of those different things work just fine. If you go to the App Store and you type in CDC contraception, it is going to take you to the contraception app. It's free. It has this medical eligibility criteria on it. It also has selected practice recommendations, and I can talk more about that in a bit, but I use this app all the time. I recommend my students use it all the time. I double check things. Some changes just happened not too long ago, but this is a way that you can see what methods either have contraindications or don't. And the things that are in green are things that we would feel very comfortable recommending as a contraceptive method to an individual with these characteristics. Things in red or the pink are the risk really outweighs the benefit. This would not be something we would recommend moving forward with. And so I wanted to get a snapshot of the postpartum breastfeeding or not breastfeeding so that you could see how it looks a little bit different. So in general, most of our options for birth control are really good options for people in the postpartum period, unless they've had a post-septic abortion. And then you can see that those methods would not be ideal if they involve invasive procedures in the uterus, that kind of idea. What I don't have across the top is that those are the different methods, and I'll show you on the next slide. So if we go to the website, this is what it looks like. It's not quite as pretty, and it doesn't have the red and green, but it's still, again, 1s and 2s are those things that we would feel really comfortable using. If the patient had these different characteristics. 3s and 4s, we would not want to recommend to them. So for example, this is telling you that you have a breastfeeding patient in the postpartum down across the bottom of the chart. And if they're less than 21 days postpartum, we would feel comfortable. It's a 2 on using the implant, on using Depo-Provera or on using progesterone-only pills. It doesn't say anything about the IUDs, but that's another, we'll talk about that in a second. But it does say you wouldn't want to use combined hormonal contraception like the traditional birth control pill, the ring, or the patch. Because of the estrogen in it and the hypercoagulability, you wouldn't want to increase the risk of DVT, PE, that sort of thing. You can see though, as the days go out, as we get to 21 to 30 days, then you get to 30 to 42. And once you're past 42 days, really, we remove that entire risk around combined hormonal contraceptives. But I just wanted to show you an example of what it might look like. And on the next slide, I think I included, yeah, so this goes out further of if they're postpartum and not breastfeeding, if they've had a cesarean delivery. This is where in the middle of the chart, you see that it says postpartum, including cesarean delivery, and it says less than 10 minutes after the delivery of the placenta or 10 minutes after. And so that's talking about our immediate post-placental IUDs. And you can see that they're really 1s and 2s. The only thing would be if someone had postpartum sepsis. We wouldn't want to necessarily put something into their uterus. And so also I included across the bottom our post-abortion contraceptive methods as well. So these are available on the CDC website. If you literally just went to Google or whatever search engine you wanted and typed in US medical eligibility or contraception MEC, that website's going to come up for you and you have it available. But the app is really, really great. And the app has the colors like the wall chart does. Now, stop me at any point, but I wanted to just make sure everybody knows what all of our different options are. And so I have a few slides, but I'm happy to talk about any of them. I'd rather answer questions than anything else. But we'll first look at our permanent and we'll talk about long-acting, non-hormonal, other hormonal options, that sort of thing. This pick, which I told you was the Partners in Contraceptive Choice and Knowledge, excellent method information sheets. So this could be a resource that you have like saved on a computer at the nursing station, and anybody can go print out a patient information form for whatever method. You could have some already printed out and people can grab them, but these are excellent patient resources. And they have all of these different methods available in the languages listed here for you. So as I mentioned, this is a really great resource. I would definitely not hesitate to share these. These are really good, well-referenced resources that would be available. Okay, so our permanent methods. We have sterilization through either vasectomy or bilateral tubal ligation. Historically, and we can go to the next slide, for BTLs or female sterilization, it has most of the time been using clips, taking a section of the tube, that sort of thing, kind of like a partial salpingectomy because you're cutting off a portion of the tube. Now more so, the method has really moved to become bilateral salpingectomy, so taking the entire tubes. And that has to do with risk of ovarian cancer, and a lot of ovarian cancer actually being potentially tubal. And so just something to think about. It's obviously not reversible if we take the whole entire tube, but we should not be thinking of tubal ligation or vasectomy as not permanent. We should consider it permanent. Although, you know, if you drive through the city, you can sometimes see some billboards about reversals and that sort of thing, but we should not be thinking about, do you want to potentially reverse this in the future? Okay, next slide. Now we'll talk about our LARCs, long-acting reversible, and we have our IUDs or IUSs. Companies call them different things. IUD is a more like traditional word. We have the implantable rod called Nexplanon, and then we have injectable hormone like Depo-Provera. With these, this is a chart that tells you about all of the various IUDs that we currently have available and the years that they are considered effective. The different manufacturers may tell you a different timeline, or the FDA may say it's approved for a different amount of time. So for example, Mirena was initially on the market for 5 years. Well, now with the amount of research that we have from so many different resources, we now know that it's definitely good for 6. It's really good for 7. And for most people, it can probably be good for 8. So you can even get more cost effectiveness out of these different devices because the effectiveness continues after the original FDA approval. Whether or not you can use it as emergency contraception, what the total doses are, what the strings look like, because patients don't always know what kind they've had put in previously or that sort of thing. But this is just the different devices that we have. All of them have levonorgestrel or progestin, except for the Paragard. The Paragard is copper, non-hormonal, good for a really long time. So these are really great options. Slide. They can be used post-placental, so within 10 or 15 minutes after delivery of the placenta, and can be inserted right at the time of delivery, or we can do them at an interval. And usually the interval is somewhere between 6 and 12 weeks postpartum. Again, can be done anytime after that. IUDs can really be used all the time, and should be a first line in a lot of different situations. But we can do them post-placental. I don't know if your facilities are doing that or not. But this is showing that you would take the IUD out of the device and hold it with a ring forceps and put it up to the fundus. I've seen people completely take it out and put it between their fingers and insert. The uterus is very, very thin at this point. So we don't necessarily want to use the insertion device that it comes with because we don't want to perforate the uterus. Shockingly, expulsion rates are really low, like 20% or less, which when you think about the fact that you're putting it in a uterus that has a cervix that was just dilated to 10 centimeters, pretty incredible. They can also be inserted in post-C-section. Oftentimes we'll place it in the uterus and then poke the strings down through, or we'll finish the C-section and then place it. And then again, it can be done in the interval. Well, I'm sure you guys will have some questions about this. We'll come back to it, but we'll go on. KDHE has some great resources. I checked to see that they're still available online, and they are. It came out in 2019, but the LARC kind of handbook, it has protocols, it has documentation templates, it talks about billing and coding. It's a great resource. I would go take a look at this if you haven't before, and especially make sure your providers know that it's available. Nexplanon can also be inserted at any time, including immediately postpartum. We routinely would put them in before discharge here, maybe the day of discharge or the first day postpartum. It can be inserted up to 21 days after birth without needing any type of backup method, but again, it can be used at any time. The Nexplanon, one of the most common complaints about it is irregular bleeding, but if it's done in the postpartum period, they have much less of that irregular bleeding, so that's nice. And then Depo-Provera can be given within 5 days of birth if they're not planning to breastfeed. Ideally, if they're going to breastfeed, the recommendation is to wait until 6 weeks postpartum. And that's from the CDC and the FDA. Certainly, it's a risk-benefit thing. I've had patients that were like, no, they absolutely needed this and they are breastfeeding and we're going to do it before discharge, but we counsel the patient really well about establishing breastfeeding, having a good supply, those sorts of things. And then our non-hormonal methods, we have barrier methods, we have natural family planning, and our spermicides. These are options that a lot of people will use in the postpartum period. The thing to know about natural family planning methods is that it's really hard to predict when that first ovulation might be. It can also depend on the frequency of feedings. Using lactation as a means of birth control is in contrast to everyone wanting their baby to sleep through the night. So we need babies eating at regular intervals for that to be a highly effective birth control method. Barriers work great if people use them. I'm a big fan of using lubrication with those. People always think that condoms break a lot. They break when there's a lot of friction. So lubrication can help there. And then spermicides, traditionally, we've only had Minoxidil 9 for years and years and years, but now we have a prescription brand called Phexxi, and it's more citric acid, lactic acid based. The great thing about it is it does not have the same risk as Minoxidil 9. When people think that they are allergic to latex, I oftentimes say it's probably more so the spermicide on the condom or that sort of thing. Naloxone 9 actually has a black box warning because it causes little micro tears in the tissue of the vagina. And then that actually can increase the risk of HIV acquisition, other STIs and so forth because of those little micro tears. So it's great that we have something other than Naloxone 9 now. And then our traditional methods, like our birth control pills, patch and ring. Again, we can start these safely now at 42 days postpartum. That has been traditionally, we have always said to avoid estrogen in the postpartum period because of the effect on milk supply and so forth. But they are now a 2 recommendation from the medical eligibility criteria. Again, breastfeeding is well established. We're past that risk of the PE DVT that we have from pregnancy. And so these can be really, really great methods. The other thing that is nice about these is in our breastfeeding moms, sometimes their vaginal vulvar tissues really need some estrogen. And it can be a much more comfortable postpartum experience for them if their tissues are getting some estrogen. So in general, okay to start at 6 weeks. And again, that concern for clotting is the real reason to avoid them initially. All right, so I wanted to share again some resources with you. There's a couple of different ones here. We mentioned PIC. The other is Bedsider. I saw that Tara had a slide of a Bedsider handout right before I started. Love the resource, not ideal for your conservative patients that don't like talk about like semen and sex acts and that kind of stuff. For your young people, great resource. I love it. It has reminders that you can put into your phone that will tell you when to use the different methods. Awesome, awesome resource. The other is an ACOG resource. It's the Postpartum Contraceptive Access Initiative, and they've got a lot of guidance and provider resources, especially around billing and coding. And then the Reproductive Access has excellent patient teaching aids as well. So those are available to you. And then I'm always open to anyone that has questions, and I am happy to point people in the right direction with whatever resources they have. So if you don't have a chance to ask your question today, or you don't want to ask it in front of a big group or that sort of thing, I am used to answering questions about people's friends all the time. And so I'm happy to do that for you as well. In a non-provider, non-medical advice kind of way, but also I'm happy to help you as facilities and providers and so forth if you have any questions, but I'd love to open it up for whatever you might have.
Okay,
Thanks,
guys,
Brenda. I like your feedback.
Yes, this is your opportunity, you guys, to ask any questions that you have. Dr. Busenhart, thank you so much for taking the time today to do this fabulous, well-informed talk for us. So if
you can tell I like it. It was a lot of, it felt like a lot of word vomit, but
No, it's great. It's great.
I love
So
talking about contraception.
I'm trying to peek in the chat to see. We don't see any questions in there.
I had a question. Tara might not know the answer. At our facility, Advent Health Shawnee Mission, we've just never had any providers that have really done like IUDs or anything right after delivery. Is it provider specific or is it like?
It probably is provider specific, and then it may depend on how recently they did their training. So their residency, if their residency wasn't doing it, it feels like a lot of times people don't always go to those new things if that wasn't part of their training. So it is a little bit newer. Certainly ACOG is putting out a lot of information about it. In midwifery, we talk a lot about IUDs now, especially post-placental. So it may start to bubble up. I know in facilities, the other concern has always been like, well, will their insurance cover it? And what do I do? With the Affordable Care Act, it really increased payment for almost all of our IUDs and the Nexplanon. The only thing is if someone has a high deductible plan, but if you have a high proportion of Medicaid patients, Medicaid will pay for these regardless. I mean, like all of these methods are approved. And so we've just gotten to a place here that they were routinely doing post-placental IUDs and the Nexplanon before discharge because we had a high Medicaid population.
Okay. I think that is what I have heard from providers is that
Yeah.
it's not included in the global delivery fee. So it,
Yeah. But there's additional billing that you can do for this procedure.
okay.
Yeah.
So they can charge to place it at the time and still get reimbursement for placing it at the time of delivery, as opposed to waiting for them to come back into the office.
Okay.
Yes, my understanding
Yes.
is that, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I understand that places don't want to lose money.
Mhm.
In some respect, the insertion is so easy. I wouldn't worry about the insertion charge as long as you're getting the device fee covered, because that's where the real expense is.
Right.
And Kate, we were talking before this started too, and there are, like Nexplanon will go obviously to offices and set up in services and things like that for some of our providers who've been out for a while too. So that may be worth just suggesting or bringing it up if that's an option.
Yeah.
So there's
I see the question about prior auth for IUDs.
Yes.
I have not seen that be a problem, especially if we've had that conversation during prenatal care and we can get some of those questions answered early on. And while they quote up to a 20% expulsion rate, I have not actually had a patient that expelled one. Well, I mean, I've had a patient that was not anywhere remotely close. I mean, it is a risk of any IUD insertion is that someone could expel one. But I've not seen any in the postpartum, which is great. Most of the device companies as well, if there's any problems with the insertion, if you need another device, it fell out, that kind of thing, they do have replacement processes in place that you could get another device for your patient.
And there's always the one-off, the baby who comes out with it in their hand.
Yeah, I always wonder if that's a urban legend or if that's real, but we certainly have looked through some placentas before trying to see if we could find that IUD. The great thing is they're so highly effective that is very rare to happen because most people are not going to get pregnant. And I don't know if you noticed on that effectiveness chart, Nexplanon is the most effective birth control method. It is more effective than sterilization, and our IUDs are up there as well. So those are, again, for your people that please do not let me get pregnant. Those are great options. Some of us that are nearing menopause are also really happy with some of those methods, but they're good for everybody. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for this opportunity to talk with you about it. And again, reach out if you have any questions.
Love it. Thank you again. And just a couple reminders to you guys, there will be no learning forum for July. So make sure you join us again in August. And then Tiffany will be sending out the slide deck after the learning forum. So when she does that, that will include in that the link for you all that haven't filled out your survey regarding the 2025 AIM bundle decision. Your input is incredibly valuable to us to get an idea of what you have going on at your facility surrounding these 4 topics that we've listed, as well as trying to identify kind of what that would look like to implement one of these bundles. So whether you're a member of FTI or not, enrolled facility or not, please make sure you fill out that survey for us. And if there's no other questions, then I think we are done for the day. We'll give you guys back a few extra minutes and we will see everyone in August. Thanks everyone for joining.